This is the Boundless Pursuit podcast, a show highlighting the purity of the experience without limitation. Each week, we'll bring anglers as diverse as the fish they chase, whether it be from your backyard or your bucket list. Freshwater, saltwater, conventional gear, or fly. We're bringing stories and perspectives from fishermen from all walks of life, from across the country and globe. In the digital age, authentic communication and networking is critical, and I'd love to hear from you about show suggestions, potential guests, or general feedback. And you can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find the entire collection of written articles, podcast episodes, and media. I deeply value the feedback, ratings, reviews, and support of my listeners, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. Today's guest is joining from clear on the other side of the world. Avid angler Taiki Avidangling is a Japanese lure fisherman, and he has really been around and seen his fair share of big fish and unique species. But interestingly, many, if not most of the species that he chases in his home waters in Japan are familiar faces to us here in the States. Japan's bass fishing scene has exploded in popularity and birthed a massive market of lure manufacturers and technology. And Japan grows them big. But Japan's also home to fish that we're accustomed to seeing here in the States, like smallmouth bass, bluegill, and channel catfish. It's a curious case because in the mix of these catches that we know well, Taiki is also fishing for native Japanese barramundi and non-native northern snakeheads. And so during this conversation, I couldn't help but ask how fish like bass, bluegill, and channel catfish are viewed and received in Japan, and any potential effect that they've had on native species. And that angle just made for a really interesting topic. But still, Taiki is just an adventurous angler. And he talks about solo travel to the Amazon, where the guy backpacked across Guyana, cutting through jungle, living out of tents, and enlisting the help of indigenous communities to gather intel on target species like wolffish, arapaima, and peacock bass, then conquering these fish on artificial lure. This is an awesome conversation with a guy who speaks a common language, the love of the pursuit and the passion for big fish. This is Taiki Avidangling chiming in all the way from Japan. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Taiki, I'm glad we were able to get this thing lined up because you're probably getting ready for bed. I just woke up. This is the vastest time difference that I've had ever since I started this podcast. But my favorite part about this podcast is like getting to interact with anglers from all over the country, all over the world. So us being able to line up a 14-hour time difference, pretty good. So I appreciate you. I don't know what time you normally go to sleep, but man, I'm normally in bed by, what time is it there? 10 p.m.?
It's past 10 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks
man.
for having me.
Oh, for sure. Well, like I mentioned before, I try to not fall asleep during this because I was up all night last night trying to catch a shark. And so I'm operating on like an hour and a half of sleep, but I have my coffee and I think we'll be okay. But I didn't want to miss this one. If you'd have been probably anybody else, if you'd have been just some American angler, I'd have probably sent a message and said, let's reschedule. But the fishing that you do and that you've done is really exciting. And it's really interesting to me because, I mean, you're a guy who has really like traveled a lot. I don't know where all you've been, but I've seen a lot of South America stuff with the arapaima, the big peacock bass. You've done the Temensis peacock bass, which I want to talk about because that's an interesting one. But the curious thing that really I think prompted me to reach out to you is for the longest time I followed you on Instagram, and I'm like, is this guy in America? Because you're catching smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, channel catfish, different kinds of familiar looking salmon. I'm like, where is he? But then the next picture is like a northern snakehead, a giant snakehead, arapaima, barramundi. I'm like, he's either a really well-traveled American guy, or I know some of these fish live in Japan. So where were you born? I know you're in Japan right now, but your English is really fluent. So I'm curious about your background and your background as an angler and where you got started in fishing.
Yeah, so I was actually born in New York, but I was only there for a few months at the time I was born, and then just came back to Japan after that. And then I moved back to Boston when I was like in second grade in elementary. And then I lived there for 6 years. That's why I can speak English, pretty normally. But after that, I went back to Japan. I lived all my life, the rest of my life in Japan. So I usually don't speak English or use English at all in normal daily life. But um, I do travel sometimes, like you said, and
Yeah.
I start off fishing in the States actually. Like actual fishing, I started out like, backyard pond fishing for bluegills and bass,
Right.
like any other American angler. And then, I went fish like bass fishing, pickerel fishing, all that stuff in Boston. And when I went back to Japan, I started like reaching out to carp fishing
Oh, okay.
and catfish and all that Japanese species. Yeah, and that's how it just the species kept adding up.
Yeah. And then what's interesting to me is that a lot of the fish we have here are over there. So like I don't really know the history of that, but like the introduction of largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, even channel catfish, was that an intentional thing in Japan? Like, oh, here's a type of fish that we can create, I don't know, a sporting industry around, or was it like do people keep them in aquariums and they let them go, or like how did that come about?
I think no, it was introduced formally at first, and they were introduced as like as a food source. I think at first, but this was over 100 years ago. I think, and I'm not sure if it was before World War II or after, but around that time when food wasn't really, you know, um, food was kind of an issue at the time, maybe. But most people didn't eat freshwater fish
No,
in
yeah.
Japan because we don't have that. We only have a culture of eating saltwater fish. So they just kind of exploded in population in rivers and lakes. And then I think in the 80s or 90s, the people brought over bass fishing, like sport bass fishing from the States, and people
Okay.
actually targeting using artificials. And that's how it exploded from there.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. I mean, I understand that like the Japanese market of like lure manufacturing and sport fish, it is, correct me if I'm wrong, but even at this point, I think the world record bass might be in Japan. I mean, they're catching huge fish over there.
It is. I think it's a tie record, but the record was caught in Lake Biwa maybe 10 years ago or so. So they have giant bass in Lake Biwa, no doubt about it. There are
Okay.
world record breakers that are actually in there, and people have seen them.
Oh, I got you. Okay. And then BY, I recognize the name because I know that's a lure manufacturer itself, right? So
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think so. Oh man. So then this is even though it's like an introduced fish, it isn't considered is they I mean, I don't think they're considered a pest at this point. Everybody wants to catch them. And then
I
so what
think it's yeah,
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
it's
I'm sorry.
divided. No, no, no. It's
Oh.
divided completely. Like as like most the government or the media portrays them as evil still,
Oh.
kind of. But on the other hand, like most fishermen love bass. Like most lure fishermen, I guess, grew up bass fishing and still bass fish most of the time. So then the industry's enormous here. So I mean, on the um like on the media side it's portrayed as evil, but actually everybody likes them here.
Okay, so it's yeah, that's the funny thing. It's like here we have similar circumstances with like something like a snakehead,
Hmm.
which again, that's another one that you've got in Japan. But like our northern snakeheads and our bullseye snakeheads here in Florida, kind of the same thing. They were introduced. I don't even remember when. It was like in the early 2000s, and they generated a lot of hysteria. The media made like these crazy news stories about how they can walk across land and they eat everything in sight. They'll attack people and try to eat your dog.
Right,
uh,
right.
but yeah, it's taking a little bit longer, I think, because there's not as much of like a marketing campaign behind the snakeheads, but they have
Hmm.
become extremely popular here. Now, that's another one that I've seen on your page with northern snakeheads, but those aren't native to Japan either, are they? Is that where you've been catching them? Again, I don't know if you're traveling for those or if y'all have northern snakeheads also introduced for the same reason the bass were introduced.
Yeah, so most foreigners don't know this, but northern snakehead are also introduced to Japan, and they're not native here. But
Okay.
their range, like they populate pretty much the entire peninsula. They're everywhere pretty much, as with bass. But I think snakeheads were here a bit earlier than the bass. I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay. And so then like people's perception of them over there are
Hmm.
folks, I don't know, do people have a favorite? Like, do they seem to favor snakeheads over bass, or vice versa? Are they more interested or excited in bass or snakeheads? If there was a debate over there right now, or is it kind of
Hmm.
even?
I mean, bass fishing is way more popular here, no
Mhm.
doubt about it. But snakehead fishing in Japan is kind of funny. It's weird actually. There are hardcore snakehead fishermen in Japan. But the population of people who target them is so much lower than bass fishermen. And in the States, I think snakehead fishermen target snakeheads using all types of lures. But in Japan, when you talk about snake fishing, it's exclusively using hollow body frogs for them.
Okay. It's similar. Yeah, I mean it's mostly frog fishing here as well, but yeah, people are starting to experiment with different methods, but it usually comes back to mostly being frog fishing. And I guess really that's probably why the bass would ultimately be more popular because there's just more patterns, there's more ways to do it. Uh that's debatable too, but it makes sense.
I mean, snakeheads you can catch with all kinds of lures, as with bass. But in Japan, I don't know. We have this unwritten rule that we can only use hollow body frogs, and most people just follow them. Mostly because it's just more fun to cast them on frogs.
Yeah.
But um, it's almost like most catches that are done other than hollow body frogs are not even counted as a catch usually.
Oh, that's funny. Now,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think you had mentioned that the snakeheads have been there longer than the largemouth bass. Did
Hmm.
anybody? I mean, are they living together in the same bodies of water? I mean, did was there like a noticeable impact that the bass had on the snakeheads, or the other way around, or they're just getting along just fine?
They're both species live in the same environment, but I guess snakeheads are more tolerant to temperature and oxygen level, so they can live in really shallow places, whereas bass need a little more oxygen, I think.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, snakehead need vegetation to spawn and reproduce, but bass don't necessarily need vegetation. So in Japan, we have lots of natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes
Hmm.
and tsunamis and all that. Like pretty, it's pretty common to have natural disasters here, and so most of the ponds and rivers and streams are like covered in concrete, should I say. It's like hardened with
Yeah.
concrete so that it doesn't flood or like corrupt, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why snakehead population is becoming really, really low in recent times. So I think overall bass is more populated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, it's probably easier too, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. And then like I noticed also you're catching the smallmouth bass. Were they introduced around the same time as the largemouth bass, or was that, or are you aware, or did they come later?
I think they were after largemouth bass, but were only they only were placed in like 2 to 3 lakes in northern Japan, and they were only there for quite a long time until maybe 20 years ago. People started like introducing them in all over Japan
Yeah.
illegally.
Okay.
And that's why, yeah, that's why they're here in most rivers and most lakes around Japan now. But 20 years ago, you couldn't hear any smallmouth action in most places.
Yeah.
So it's pretty recent.
And then I've also seen you catching channel catfish, which that one throws me off because
Hmm.
I get people moving largemouth bass and smallmouth bass because it's very popular sport fish. But even here, like a
Hmm.
channel catfish is, it's just sort of there. It's not really a very popular here. Some people catch them and like fry them and eat them a little bit, but channel catfish. Now, what is I mean, what is people's opinions on those? I mean, how are they adapting to the environment over there? They're not causing any kind of problems or anything.
No, they are a huge problem here. Most people hate them so much. Um,
Oh man.
because yeah, they're I guess people say they taste good, but most people don't eat catfish in Japan. So
Mhm.
most people, I think, when they catch one, throw them on the bank,
Oh yeah.
um, which is kind of sad. But they are overpopulating a certain lake in eastern Japan. Um, and that lake was really popular for bass fishing. But when they introduced catfish, for some reason, the population plummeted. I don't know why,
Oh, okay.
but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That throw in the now here in America, people will throw certain things up on the bank, like any
Hmm.
unwanted species of fish. I feel like it doesn't happen as much as it even did 10, 20 years ago. That was like all the time. Now it just seems like there's more, especially younger anglers are more interested in catching different kinds of fish. So you see a lot less of just killing something because you don't like it. You definitely see it, but you do not see people do that with a channel catfish. So like that
Hmm.
difference is interesting to me because it's like people here they enjoy channel catfish enough to not want to kill them. But I thought that was interesting. And then are there other species? Those are just the ones I've seen on your page. Like what other
Hmm.
introduced species? Well, I guess specifically American species are in Japan right now, or is that the main ones? Bluegill, crappie, anything like that?
Bluegills, yeah, definitely bluegills.
Okay,
Yeah, they're considered like in the same way as channel cats, I think,
I could see that.
because they're more of a like they have more negative um effects on the environment more compared to bass because they just eat all the eggs and all the
Mhm.
insects.
Yeah, notorious egg eaters, and they spawn a lot in those big giant like fields of beds of tons of fish spawning at the
Hmm.
same time. Yeah, they can take over. They can take over quick. I guess the interesting part of all this is that those fish now occupy a space that presumably other fish used to occupy. What are some of the native species that I know Japan's not huge, but there's fresh
Right.
water there. But
Yeah.
was there any kind of like you know displacement of native species that took place, or native species that have pretty much died off, or You just can't really find much anymore. Like, what native species do you have there that you'll typically chase as an angler?
To be honest, native freshwater species we have in Japan are mostly small, like really small.
Mm,
And probably the only predators we have, like natural predators, native predators we have are catfish and barbel. Barbel are like species of carp which
yeah.
eat other fish, but those two are probably the only freshwater species that we can target on artificials. And the others are all small. That's why bass and bluegill and all the non-native species have a big impact on the environment because we have so many species of small, like 10 to 15-inch, like bait fish, you'd call probably.
Yeah. I gotcha. Now, y'all's native catfish, I've seen in some of your photos. Again, these may have been travel fish. You holding
Hmm.
up not huge catfish, but I don't know, over a foot long. That almost look like a miniature version of like a whale's catfish. They had that
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
eel like body. Are those some of the native ones you're speaking of, or was that something different?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They're called Amur catfish, and they range, I think, all across the continent.
How big do
Like
those
the Asian,
get?
those get to probably 80 centimeters, which is like 30 inches long at least. I mean, not at least, at most.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they look exactly like the whales.
Yeah, like a little miniature version. Okay, because I saw that and
Right.
I was like, well, what is that thing I'm looking at? And y'all salmon fishery looks pretty interesting. Are those native? Are those native species of salmon that
Yes.
you're chasing or?
We have
Okay.
salmon species and trout species that are native to Japan. And I think the one I posted, the salmon was the chum salmon that I caught in Hokkaido, which is the northern island of Japan. And another one is the biwa trout, which is called trout but are actually salmon.
Oh, okay.
Um, and they're called cherry salmon in English, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty cool looking. Because I saw those and I'm like, I don't imagine that those are introduced because salmon are pretty widespread and they're up in Russia and all kinds of places. But yeah,
Right.
that's for it's Japan just seems like such a unique fishery because for a relatively small place, it's still there's a lot of diversity. Granted, a lot of that diversity was introduced species, but it definitely seems like a unique place to have grown up fishing. But there's one that you caught recently that I thought was really neat, and it was like a barramundi. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people think of barramundi as being, you know, the Australian, you know, they're only in Australia. But I know just in reading your captions or translating some of the captions that it seemed like a pretty meaningful catch. Now, do y'all have a different like species of barramundi, or is that also another introduced species of fish?
No, the barramundi we have in Japan are called akame in Japanese, and they're Japanese barramundi, so they're native here.
Oh, okay.
But their range is really limited to just like a few certain places in Japan, and in some prefectures it's even protected, so you can't actually target them.
Hmm.
But if you do go to some of these places where they have akame, um, people catch them pretty often. Some of them up to like 40 kilos, which is like 100 pounds,
Oh
close
my
to 100 pounds,
gosh!
which is
Wow.
pretty ginormous for like even a barramundi.
Yeah, that would almost look more like a Nile perch, which I guess are
Yeah.
related to those. They just
Uh
look
huh.
the same to me.
They're all in the Lattes family, which is a scientific name, like their Latin name, I guess.
Oh,
They're all in the
okay.
same family. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they almost look like a giant snook or something like that too. How do you?
Right.
What is the approach to catching one of those? Like, how do you?
Most people, yeah.
No, just like how do you pursue that thing?
Most people target them using artificials just because it's more fun. Like me, like with me, but you can also target them using live mullet, like live bait fish.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, older people use live bait to target them, and I think the younger generation tend to use artificials a little more.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes just going and getting a live bait and keeping a live bait alive, it's almost more of a hassle. It's like, you know, sometimes it's easier in some ways. It's more of a, you know, more of a task in other ways. But yeah, I mean, now that is like a fish that is when I watch the videos of them, they seem so interesting because are they schooling? Are they together? Or is it like a solitary fish you have to work all day just to find one?
I think both, but I'm not an expert on this. Definitely roam around in schools, but not all the time. Some of them, especially the really big ones, um, stay solitary, like under a bridge or like near a structure or something.
Yeah, that is a really cool fish. I don't even think I knew that that was a thing until I saw the one on your page. So that's interesting. Now in Japan, like the culture of fishing, is it? I mean, I know here in the United States, a lot of anglers seem to favor like one style of fishing or one type of fish. They'll spend their whole life just chasing bass, or they'll spend their whole
Right.
life as like a fly fisherman for trout. But is it
hmm
the same kind of over there, or is everybody doing what you seem to do and chasing a more broad variety of fish?
No, not at all. Most people target maybe one or two species at most. But in Japan, we have a enormous variety of fishing, fishing, like so many different types of fishing that you wouldn't see anywhere else in the world. Um, and I don't know, the younger generation tends to be more open to variety of species, but it's not that common yet.
Yeah,
Like a lot of bass fishermen here only target bass, as with the United States. Um, People target like carp, like 24/7 throughout the entire year.
hmm
There's definitely that type of anglers here, but I don't know. I think it's similar to the states.
yeah. I mean, that's normal. People kind of find their favorite. I mean, I have my favorite fish. I try to do more, but y'all
Mhm.
saltwater scene seems like maybe more popular. Now that seems like an interesting place. Like some of the like the I mean, I don't know if the coastal fishing is as big or people are pretty much going out in boats, but y'all's saltwater scene. Now, I'm not much of a saltwater fisherman myself, even though I just spent all night last night trying to catch sharks. But like, what are some of the more popular saltwater fish? I guess that you don't have to make a 50-mile run offshore to go catch.
So I think sea bass, Japanese sea bass, is the most popular saltwater fish we have here, and those bass are called sea bass, but they also travel upstream in rivers pretty often. They can travel like 40 miles upstream
Oh, okay.
sometimes. So both freshwater anglers and saltwater anglers are target them, but they can also be caught pretty out far in the ocean. So that's why they're pretty popular.
Yeah.
Um,
Now,
and
is that the one that I've
everybody like.
seen? That
Mhm,
one in your photos, if I'm thinking of the same fish, there's some kind of fish you've got a lot of pictures with them that almost looks like
mhm.
the snook that we have here in Florida, but that like without the line across their body. It looks like a very similar looking fish. And I was like, I wonder if
Yeah,
that's like a relative of our snook.
I'm not sure if it's a relative, but it definitely looks pretty similar. It's more silvery and don't doesn't have a line across it,
Hmm.
and but I think their size and their appearance is really similar. I think. and everybody targets them using artificial too.
Yeah, yeah, it's a unique looking fish, but um, yeah, man. What takes me back about your pages is the variety of fish that you caught. So you've clearly, I don't know, taken your own path in fishing. But like, at what point did you start deciding, man, I want to like travel to someplace like South America? I mean, tell me about some of your travels to South America. Because it looks like you've gone several times to a couple different countries. Where all have you been there?
So when I was a uni student, I just decided to go to South America for really, just the adventure of it. Because I always wanted to go to the Amazon rainforest at least once in my life.
Mhm.
And I read and heard about all the species that live there that you can target them using artificials. And so I thought, why not now? And but of course I was a student back then and I didn't really have any money. So I just kind of bought a ticket there and back and set a date and went just on a backpacking mission, I guess, for fishing.
Oh wow, that's cool.
hmm And I was there for 2 months in total
Oh
at
my
the time.
goodness.
And I traveled in Brazil first and targeted peacock bass. And then I moved to Guyana and then fished the Essequibo in a couple different places. And then went back to Brazil and fished a little more across a 2 month time range.
Oh yeah. So I'm guessing in Brazil is where you caught those like the 3-barred Temensis peacock bass, like the bigger peacock bass. Is that where that was at?
hmm
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Manaus, near Manaus in Brazil.
Yeah. Where in who'd you go to Guyana with? Not with, but like what lodge did you use? Because I just
No, so
went there
like
last
I said,
September.
I didn't really use a lodge. Like I just backpacked across, like all across the
Oh, that's
Essequibo,
crazy.
and just
'Cause
went fishing out with the locals.
Oh my gosh. See, to me, I didn't even know that that's like a possibility. It like seems like one of those impenetrable places that you like have to
Mhm.
have guidance to even get in there. I gotta go down. I gotta know more about that. So like how'd you manage to even contact some of the locals? Or do you mean people local to Georgetown, Guyana, or do you mean people like that were like in the in the jungle? Like who do you reach out to and how?
I just took action, talked to people once I reached there, like talked about all the places I could go. But before I went there, I kind of jotted down a couple places I could go. Possibilities.
Yeah,
I listed places that I would want to go. Like
right.
tributaries and stuff. But I didn't really think of like which town I would go through to get down to the river. So I didn't have all that planned out. So because I could speak English and Ghana is an English speaking
Mhm.
country, I could do that.
Yeah. So you just managed to find a guy with a boat willing to take you way up the river. And now, did that person stay with you, or did they just drop you off and say good
No,
luck?
no, no, no. Of course, I would pay that boatman
Yeah.
for for guiding me and all the gasoline and all that stuff, and they would take me camping. So he would stay with me throughout the
Okay.
entire trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Because
I'm
I.
not sure if it's like officially okay to do that. I'm not sure about that part.
I don't know if that would be okay or not either. I think that's way more interesting,
Uh-huh.
and admirable and more adventurous. But I didn't know if like you had linked up with like indigenous communities of people,
hmm
and done it that way. That's so unique. Because you must have gone pretty far to start getting to like some of the arapaima and things like that. I know that you caught arapaima on
hmm
lures, which I'm very jealous of. I didn't catch mine on a lure. I caught mine on a peacock bass head. So,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but I really
Yeah.
like when I go back, that's the way I want to do it. But so that must have been a big goal of yours specifically to catch one of those. But
It was, but my main target in Guyana was to catch giant Aymara. That was
oh
my main
yeah,
target, and I had to go way into the jungle and way upstream to catch Aymara, which was probably the most difficult species, but it was worth the effort, definitely. But
yeah.
it took 4 or 5 days to just get to the river.
Oh my goodness. And where are you sleeping during all this? Did you like bring a hammock tent? Like, are you
Yeah, I
make it?
brought a hammock myself.
Oh yeah.
Uh huh.
And then as far as getting food, like I went and there was like, you know, when I say lodge, a lot of people, at least Americans, when they hear lodge, they think it's like, a hotel and there's like 5-star meals and everything's very nice, which the lodge I stayed at was, all things considered for jungle standards was nice. But, at the end of the day, food wasn't going to be an issue. But like when you're there, what are you eating? Just the fish that you catch? Did the like guy bring big bags full of oatmeal or something? I mean, what are you eating the whole time? Because that's so much more interesting. I'm sitting here thinking you probably went with one of the the local like the outfitters or operations that are there, like the tour agencies. What are you eating the whole time?
What? Well, to be honest with you, I don't really know what I was eating. They just, they just told me try this, try that. I just ate what I could. Now, of course, I ate the fish I caught and some of the like nuts and plants that were edible,
Mhm.
and we brought along fruits and dry jerky of meat. I'm not really sure of.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think when
so
you
I
get
just
hungry enough, it doesn't matter. Jeez.
yeah,
Were you
exactly. It doesn't
alone?
really matter.
Were you by yourself the whole time, or were you with a friend or like a partner?
No, through that backpacking journey, I was alone,
Oh my
but I was
gosh.
always with somebody though.
Well,
I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
travel alone. Yeah,
yeah. Well,
into the jungle.
you were with somebody that could like act as a guide or act as like, somebody that could show you around. But as far as like going
Hmm.
from Japan to there, you're
Hmm.
essentially by yourself. That is really
Right.
neat. Did you have like a satellite phone or like how were you keeping contact with, I don't know, maybe your family is nervous that you're way far away from home, walking around backpacking alone in the jungle.
Hmm. Nah, I didn't carry anything. Looking back, I was pretty stupid. Like I didn't have anything with me. I was
Yeah.
traveling through the jungle and all the swamps and flip flops, which is pretty ridiculous to think about right now.
Yeah. I mean, did you have an idea? I mean, the Amara, it's funny you mentioned that. Like to me,
Hmm.
when I go back to Guyana, because eventually I'm going to, probably in the
Hmm.
next 2 to 3 years, I'll make another trip. I feel like that's going to be the species that brings me back. Like that, it's very similar to a fish that we have in the United States called a bowfin. Well, I don't know. There's some they look kind of similar. So like that was
Uh
always my
huh.
favorite fish growing up. And
Uh
so
huh.
when I learned about, and everybody calls them wolffish here, it's like they call them wolffish, but the Aymara, I think that is one of the most interesting and just amazing looking fish. But did you have any idea like where they were at, or was the guy that was like showing you upriver? Did he know, or were you just like, hey, let's go try this creek that I see on this, and then getting around like navigating the person that you're with? I'm assuming they know the river pretty well, or are you like with a paper map? I mean, how are you not getting lost?
Now the guy I was with knew the river really well, so I didn't have any trouble with that. But um, I kind of made a prediction that wolfish may be around this area, because no other fisherman has been in that place I think before
Oh
in Target
man.
Aymara. So, but I kind of had that feeling because I knew Aymara live upstream in most cases, all across the Guyana all across French Guyana, Suriname, Venezuela. In all those countries, all the Aymara live farther upstream, like
Mhm.
in the furthest junk, like way up in there,
Yeah.
you know? And it's the hardest to get to. But if you go deeper, the bigger the Aymara gets. That's what I knew as information before I went in there. So I just picked a town that I could look up, which was the deepest in the jungle, and found a way to get there.
Yeah. That must have been so much more I don't know, fulfilling to actually get all the way there on your own like research and then finally catch one. But
Hmm.
I had no idea. I was sitting here thinking you probably booked the trip through some service, but to just go backpacking it alone. I mean, we could have done a whole podcast on this. What did you bring? Like, what is in your backpack? Like, what is your essential gear pack for all of this? Like, what was your supply kit like?
My supply kit really was just some clothes, fishing gear, um, water filter,
Oh yeah, because
some
yeah, you're just
medicine.
drinking river
That's about
water.
it, really. Like in a hammock. So yeah, I was drinking right straight out of the river using the filter.
Oh
So
man. Okay. Sheesh. What about like knives and I mean, did you make
yeah,
fires?
of course we had knives. But we used a lighter or match to light a fire,
Mhm.
and just survival, just usual survival.
This guy that you were out there with, are you still connected with him? Is this somebody you still talk to?
No, because he doesn't own a phone.
Oh my
I can't
gosh.
really have, yeah, because he's like the he grew up in the jungle. Like he doesn't have any contact or anything outside the village.
Gosh, that's amazing. That would be
So
so interesting. It's just a
it
different
is, it
like
is.
type of life too that you could just show up there, some stranger from another place asking for somebody to take you
Hmm.
off into the jungle and somebody go, "Oh, sure, I'll come with you." Like ah,
Yeah,
now, did you have any interesting like wildlife encounters? Any unique uh animal visitors or anything like that? I mean, you're out there for a while, like really in it.
so there were every day when you wake up, you'd see jaguar tracks all the time, which was
Oh,
pretty scary.
yeah.
But we didn't actually see any jaguars, but we definitely saw a lot of monkeys and
Mhm.
tapirs, capybaras. Like we saw a lot of wildlife, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That's like I think the jaguar is like the holy grail of animals to see there. It's
Mhm.
like a ghost though. I know like when I was in Guyana, it's like I was surprised by how little like we just didn't you like couldn't see the animals because the jungle's so thick. There's like green walls along the river. It's like
Mhm.
we would always hear things and you could even smell animals, but we just couldn't see anything because there's like, if they're 2 feet into the foliage, they're lost because the jungle is just too thick to see anything. But I mean, you're sleeping out there every night. How about the weather? What time of year did you do all this? It wasn't the rainy season, I take it.
Yeah, I went there during February. So
Okay,
it
yeah.
wasn't really that it was a dry season. It didn't rain much, but it was so much colder than expected. And every night I'd be freezing in the hammock. And I didn't really get any sleep.
Oh my gosh. Uh, that is
Yeah.
interesting. But the guy that you're with, I guess he spoke enough English to like, at what point do you say, okay, I want to go back now? Like, I mean, how many days total were you in? You might have already said this and I just like, it went over my head.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how many days were you in Guyana, like in the Essequibo?
And it's the Quibo. I did 3 sessions and I was probably fishing for maybe 2 weeks in total,
Hmm.
but I was probably there for more than 3 weeks. Like, moving around and talking with the villagers and all that included. I was there probably almost close to a month.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I had no idea that that was the approach that you took. And did you do similar in Brazil? Was it just backpacking the whole time? I mean, how did you navigate your way to like the Temensis peacock bass? You just kind of knew
Um,
the rivers they were in and convinced somebody to take you?
it was similar, but of course, they speak Portuguese, so it doesn't go as easily.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I found somebody who could speak both English and Portuguese, so they translate for me, and we figured out a price and how many days of fishing and all that. So it worked out pretty fine, and it's so much cheaper than booking like a lodge or a fishing trip,
Oh, yeah.
in Japan. So
No, and yeah, that's so much more interesting too. You got plans on going back there anytime soon? If you go back, are you gonna do the same thing, just backpack, or are you just got nah, let me just call a lodge real quick?
um, you know, I was able to do that because I was a student back then, and I didn't have time. I mean, I didn't have money, but I had a lot of time on my
Oh,
hand.
yeah, yeah.
So, but now I work, obviously,
Hmm.
and I just don't have that kind of time on me. So
Yeah,
I'd probably book a trip, which is so much. I mean, the risk is so much lower if you
yeah,
only have 1 or 2 weeks to go out.
yeah. That's interesting. Wow, man, I could
So,
have.
I always try. Yeah,
No, no, you go ahead. What were you about to
sorry,
say?
sorry. If I could, I would always want to take the adventurous route, but taking all of my life in consideration, it's not really an option. Like right away.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's always better when people do these things earlier, and I think a lot of
Mhm,
guys miss out on that because they think they have to wait. You know what I mean? Like when I think back when I
mhm.
was like fresh out of college, or maybe even in college, like the stuff that I could have done if I was smarter with the money that I had. Like when I had a little bit of money, I didn't know what to do with it. I could just go buy something stupid. I could have done some amazing trips, but oh well. What can you do?
Oh well.
Yeah. No, that's really neat. I had no idea about that. Yeah, the other one that you've did, and I know we talked a little bit about this last week. We chatted a little bit last week, but another one of the awesome catches that you have on your page is and I know I'm just totally jumping ship here. I'm just totally getting out
Hmm.
of South America. So if there's anything that that I'm glossing over that's worth mentioning, we can backtrack. But the
Yep.
giant snakeheads, the giant like tomans, the big
Hmm.
snakeheads, that is, I feel like that's one of the top fish that I want to catch right now. Now, those aren't in Japan, are they? That's just, I mean, is that
No, they're
another
not.
one that lives there too?
No, they're definitely not. They're tropical species. They can't really thrive here. I
Okay.
traveled to Malaysia to target them, and I actually target them in the Borneo Island, where the
Okay.
jungle is so much thicker, like the Amazon jungle.
Was your
And
approach
yeah,
the same? Was it the same thing there? You just went and what now that I know that you just go backpacking and talking to the locals, is that what you did for the big snakeheads too, or did you go with a guide?
no, it was what I. Yeah, that's what I did with the giant snakes too, because I was a student back then too.
Yeah. Well, that may have been a.
Um,
I'd have
yeah,
been more. That's not like where like the tigers and stuff live, is it?
no, the tigers don't live on the Borneo Island. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think so either.
yeah, I don't think the tigers are there. But like orangutans and elephants and all
Mhm.
that are there.
Yeah, I had
Um,
another guy come on this podcast who went to, I think, Borneo. He went to like Indonesia and Borneo,
mhm.
all a lot of places in the same trip. He went there to catch like king cobras and stuff.
Oh
He wasn't really
man.
fishing, but yeah, he told me about orangutans. He said the orangutans would come into the camp and like steal food and stuff. Like they were
Oh
coming in, like, yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
wow, that would be pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Now the snakehead that you caught though is like it. I mean, it really had the eye appeal, like phenomenal, fantastic colors. Is fishing for them like are you doing the same thing that you do for the northern snakeheads? Is it similar to that, or is it completely different?
It's completely different. It's almost a different, like different family almost. It's so much different than the northern snakeheads. Um, and their speed and agility is so much so much higher. Northern snakeheads don't really swim that fast or follow baits that are reeled too fast. They kind of you know s- stick right behind the bait and follow
Mhm.
up all the way in. But
Yeah.
these giant snakeheads, they swim really fast, and their bite force is so hard. Like they can bite a fish right in half with
Oh,
one, like a shark almost. And you would throw lures and reel them pretty fast, almost as fast as you can sometimes.
oh, that's interesting. And are you just like casting and hoping one will bite, or are you looking for them like are you looking for them gulping from the surface, or are you looking for the fry? Are you looking for the fry balls? How do you know where the fish are at? Are you just making hundreds and hundreds of casts all day until hopefully you get one?
Now, all three of that works. When you see a fry ball rising, there's definitely parents behind it.
Yeah.
Um, but most of the time, I like to prefer casting blind. Like, would that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't really like to cast at nests, so I
Yeah.
would cast, yeah, blindly to structure and hope that fish are in there. But with most snakeheads, they gulp air, so you can
Mhm.
also sight cast them.
Yeah. That's pretty neat. And then like, I mean, what structure are they holding to? A lot of the photos I see of them, it's like they're in like flooded timber. It's like it looks like old trees standing in the water. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah. What are they holding to? They're obviously not up in the grass and stuff like the northern snakeheads, or maybe they're usually not. But it seems like a totally different species of fish.
I think they're in the same type of vegetation that bass are in. Like all the covers, all the vegetation.
Yeah,
I think snakeheads are in there, but with giant snakeheads, I don't think you can get them out. Like you can pull them outside really heavy cover, so people tend to not fish around them because
yeah,
you just get tangled up too easily.
yeah. That makes sense. Well, sheesh. Well, what other travel plans do you have? You have any travel plans in the near future? You got any trips kind of on your mind that you're going to do in the next, I don't know, next year, next 5 years? Anything
Uh,
planned?
Man, I'm going to. I'm planning on to Florida this year.
Oh, okay.
Well, other than that, I'm thinking of going to Australia, which is pretty close to Japan,
Hmm.
and you can target moray cods using big lures and
Yeah.
frogs and all that good stuff. So that sounds like fun. And I've always wanted to catch pike and muskie,
Me too.
which because that's that's something you every American kid wants to catch growing up. You hear
Yeah.
about them all the time. So that's kind of a dream for me. Um, and I'm pretty sure I would go back to South America at least one more time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. How often are you coming back to America? Or is this something that, I mean, do you come here often, or is that it's been a long time?
No, I don't go there often. I just go there maybe once in 2 or 3 years. Whenever I have the time. I don't
Yeah.
really have that much time on my hands, so
Yeah.
I try to go as much as I can. I try to travel to as many countries as I can, but it's also really fun traveling inside Japan. So right now, I'm kind of sticking to traveling to different islands and different prefectures within Japan. So that's
Okay.
so much fun right now.
Yeah. What are you you said you're coming to Florida. What are you targeting in Florida? I mean, that's where I live right now.
So I'm thinking of targeting tarpon and bowfin are the top two species that I want to catch. Especially bowfin because I'm a snakehead angler myself, and
Yeah.
like you said, Aymara, snakehead, bowfin, all those species are like my favorites.
Yeah.
Like their appearance is so much like I like them so much.
You will
So that's what I'm
find,
looking at.
especially for artificials, the bowfin is uh uniquely challenging. I don't know. It's a very interesting one. They look like snakeheads, but
Hmm.
they live even in similar areas to like a northern snakehead, but behaviorally it's just a totally different. It's a very difficult fish with lures, and there's some
Hmm.
people who might disagree to that because the bass fishermen seem to catch them. It's a easy fish to catch on accident, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
as
yeah.
soon as you want to catch them, very difficult. Man, if you come into Florida to catch bowfin, I'm not much help with tarpon. I can help you catch ones
Hmm.
about this big. I can help you
Hmm.
catch the little tarpon, but the big ones, even me, I haven't been able to get a big one. I just need to try for them. But bowfin, man, if you're coming to Florida for bowfin, I can help you with that. But with lures, it's really difficult because it's best if you're sight fishing for them. Otherwise,
Uh-huh.
it's almost not even worth trying because they stay very isolated. They're generally don't move a lot for a lure. Like a lure can be within 3 feet of them. Their strike radius is really small. Like you have to put it right on
Okay.
them. So a lot of
Okay.
times,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of times it's best to like be in shallow water looking for them and like spot them and put the lure in front of them. If you can get a lure near them, they're normally going to bite it though. They're really opportunistic. So like drawing the bite is pretty easy, but finding the fish is like the challenge. And then visually seeing them can be very hard because they blend in. They're just so hard to see. And we have such black water here in Florida, like very tannic, stained
Yeah. Yeah.
water.
Yeah.
So but I know some really good places. I know places where we can go to catch really big ones, but
Hmm.
they're going to be harder to find. And then places where 100% you can catch plenty of them, but they might,
Hmm.
you might get a few smaller ones. But yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't ask people this question a lot. I don't know why, but a guy
Hmm.
like you, even granted you're on the other side of the world from me, I feel like your mindset towards fishing is probably similar to mine. Going for
Hmm.
experiences, going for variety, having like a target based approach. Like I want to catch this type of fish. If you could say you had, I don't want to say top 10, but maybe like top 5, we call it bucket list fish, like dream fish in the world,
In
what
the
would they
world.
be? I know that's kind of tough. That's for me, I can never, I have a hard time because it seems like it changes. But do you have like
Oh
a top
man,
5 fish? we'll
that's
say
a
we'll,
good
we'll say
question.
we'll say freshwater because it's like you got two worlds out there, saltwater and freshwater. Let's say I'm a freshwater
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. I'm more. I lean a little towards bass rather than trout. If those were two different worlds,
Mm.
so I like casting to structure and casting like lures to structure and pulling them out of um yeah. So I would say, man, this is hard. Like but like I said, Murray cod and muskie are definitely in there.
Mm.
And I would say I've already caught Aymara, but I really want to target them again.
Yeah.
Like I only got to target them for like 2 days with lures. Because it was so much hard, like so much work to get into the jungle in the first place. So I want to do more of that. And
Yeah, that's a tough one.
oh man, that's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Well,
have a species of catfish called Wallago. Wallago.
mhm.
I don't know how to pronounce that, but Wallago atu
Yeah, I
or
know
something
that
like
one.
that. Yeah, and people catch them on lures in India, and they
Yep.
grow really big.
Yeah, they do.
And
Well,
those
you can get
catfish
you can
look
get the
really
Wells
cool.
catfish on lures. Have you done the Wells
Uh-huh.
catfish yet?
No, the Wells catfish, I can kind of imagine how you target them because it's just like the Amur catfish we have in Japan.
Okay, yeah.
Because all the Amur catfish we catch in Japan are on artificials on top waters.
Hmm.
And I think if you use giant top waters in Europe, you get the same result, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, you see those videos every now and then. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, what about like an alligator gar? People are catching alligator gars on lures now quite often, actually. I'd almost say it's easy at this point.
Yeah, that's what I want to do when I get the chance. Like sight casting to alligator gar that are surfacing is kind of similar to arapaima.
Hmm.
I don't know how alligator would follow lures or actually bite moving targets, but I think it's kind of similar to arapaima.
Yeah, it may be similar. They're very responsive to lures that come across their face. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think they just have that reactionary bite almost every time. It's one of those fish that if it comes, like the lure really has to come right in front of them, but it's like a
Mm-hmm.
reactionary thing where they'll just snap at it. They'll snap at like random objects that just go by just instinctively. But so a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a game of numbers, making enough casts,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually
But
it
the fact
happens. But
is, the gar surface for air, right? So you can
yeah,
actually
they
see
do.
where they are.
Yep, and then you can know which direction they're heading in. I know people are doing it a lot like that, but there's these dams here in Texas where they
Mm-hmm.
congregate heavily, like I mean,
Oh, really?
really heavily,
Mm-hmm.
and they congregate below. Oh, there's one particular dam below Lake Livingston where
Mm-hmm.
that's where everybody's doing it now because there's
Oh,
so
really?
many alligator gar there, and you'll get them from 20 pounds to 150 pounds in the same spot on lures, but that's kind of where everybody's. I don't know. It seems interesting to me, but it's like if you're looking for the experience of going somewhere remote, you know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
the dams just really are not. There's people everywhere. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I've been there several times myself. I'm like I go there to catch bait. I don't want to be there around people. So anyway,
No, me neither.
yeah,
Me neither. But I guess you could still target like surfacing alligator gar in the
definitely.
rivers you catch them
And in
if you actually
marshes
target them.
or somewhere like
Mm-hmm.
Louisiana and the bayous and stuff. The difficult thing
Mm-hmm.
is like there in some of the rivers in Texas, there's just no visibility. Like I said, the lure is going to have
Yeah.
to come right in front of their face. So yeah, you'd just be waiting all day for them rolling and surfacing and hoping that you get the lure right in front of their face. I think people just
Mm-hmm.
don't try it enough. I think that's the big thing. Even down here,
Right.
like it's kind of like the accepted norm is that you put baits on bottom and wait. But I feel like if
Mm-hmm.
people just try more, but we've got a couple of different gar species, like our long nose gar. They'll take lures, absolutely take lures. They can grow 5 feet long, but everybody wants the alligator gar. Long nose gar is a big fish. It's a very difficult fish to hook because of the
Do you
shape of
have
their.
them in?
And
Do you have
they're
long nose gar in southern Florida?
yeah, they don't range too much further south than like Lake Okeechobee. I know some spots with really big ones, but Like in Central Florida, and most of the rivers have long-nosed gar.
Oh, really?
They're pretty prevalent in Florida, and there's some really big ones. But yeah, it's a much easier sight casting target because they like to spend more time on the surface of the water. So normally when they roll, they roll and they just kind of cut across the surface. Like sometimes the alligator gar roll and then they go right back down. So it can be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, the long-nosed gar is a fun one. A lot of the fly fishermen are starting to really go after the long-nosed gar because it's another one. Like you can see them so easily. And then it's an almost guaranteed bite. If you just bring something across their face, they're normally going to bite it, but it's like keeping them hooked is what is really difficult. Like you'll get so many chances at a fish per day, but then you'll only land a small handful of them because it's very difficult fish to hook. It's an interesting fight. They're jumping and swinging their head around in the air. It's an exciting fish.
That sounds like a lot of fun, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that makes it more challenging.
Yeah,
catch.
When long-nosed gar get 50 inches and up, it's a pretty formidable, difficult fish. They're surprisingly powerful. A lot of people in America, when they think gar, they think the little skinny, small bait-stealing gar. But like a long-nosed gar, when they get 50 inches and up, I mean, it is a tough fish. It's a really unique challenge. But anyway, I'm sitting here pitching all these ideas at you. So, but yeah, man, when you come to Florida, definitely. When are you coming? Do you know, or has that not been planned quite yet?
I'm probably going at the start of May.
Okay. Let's see, where am I going to be in May?
I'm not sure if it's a good timing or not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You can catch bowfin in Florida all year long. Tarpon, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll probably find plenty of tarpon too, but bowfin is a year-round thing. I catch them in the middle of the winter, the middle of the summer. They're fairly easy one to find if you know what I've been fishing for those things for a very, very, very long time. So, yeah, man, you'll have to let me know, and I can either get out there with you or tell you some good areas to try to do it on your own.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
that would be awesome. Yeah,
it's a cool fish. But anyway, Taiki, I know it's getting. You're probably falling asleep, and I probably need to go get more sleep if my wife will let me. But man, I appreciate your time. It's an interesting conversation. That's what I love about doing these podcasts is getting to talk to people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, seeing what you have in common, seeing what's different. But I've admired your fish on Instagram for a while now, and I'm like, that's a guy I want to talk to because you catch a lot of different kinds of fish, adventurous styles of fishing, and I don't think people talk about that kind of fishing enough. It's just too much talking about the same stuff all the time. So I'm like, I want to find the adventurous people out there and talk to those guys. But Taiki, man, I appreciate your time, and like I said, keep me in the loop on your plans for Florida for sure.
Yeah, man, thank you. Right back at you with all the fish you catch, though. They're all amazing too, man.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You're living the dream for me.
Yeah.
So,
well, who knows? Maybe I'll end up in Japan before too long. I'll need somebody that speaks the language that I can talk to. But
maybe we could link up in a different country, like Southeast Asia or anything.
Yeah. Man, that's one I really want to do. I like in the not so distant future, like Thailand or somewhere like that or Malaysia. Yeah, for sure. That'd be awesome. Well, for sure, if you're coming to Florida, let me know. I'll make some time for it and get out there with you. There's other fish around here other than bowfin, but that's
I'm open to all species, man.
Yeah. I think you'd enjoy the long-nosed gar. Getting them with lures is a different kind of challenge, but absolutely that can be done. And you'd be surprised. You'd be really surprised. It's a hard fighting fish. But anyway, Taiki, I'm gonna run inside, see if I can get a little bit of extra sleep. You probably want to go to sleep too, but I appreciate your time, man.
I appreciate you too, man. It was really fun talking to you.
Yep. Have a good one. Thank you for listening to Boundless Pursuit. Tune in each week as we bring stories and insight from uniquely talented anglers and outdoorsmen. And if you enjoyed this show, I want to hear from you. Be sure to leave a 5-star review, as this is going to drive the growth and exposure of this show. And if you have feedback or guest suggestions, I would love to hear from you. And you can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com. For all other collections of media and contact information, please visit www.boundless-pursuit.com.